Well, Jimmy, I'm so excited to talk to you. Welcome to the Intangible podcast. I've heard nothing but great things about you and the ups and downs of your life and the positive outcome that you've embarked on. Just an incredible story, and I'm really excited for my listeners to hear your story and where you're from. So if we want to jump in, we'll jump right to that. Tell me a little bit about where you're from, how you grew up, and we'll get rolling from there.
Yeah. First of all, thanks for having me on. I genuinely, I'm very grateful for the opportunity, and I'm really excited to speak with you. As far as my background is concerned, I always like to joke around, just like everything in the 1970s. I was made in Taiwan. I was born in Taiwan. I moved here to the United States with my family, and we've been always in the Chicago area. I went to school. I played a little bit of baseball, and of course I played football as well in high school, at least throughout. Had a chance to really close to joining that Northwestern team that went to the Rose Bowl back in '94, '95. But I became a Boilermaker instead, and then became a tech consultant in the tech world with Microsoft and Google. In 2018, I retired, and then here I am. But unfortunately, along the way, as you started to mention that in 2003, I was only 27 years old. I was diagnosed with young-onset Parkinson's.
I mean, I think that's why this story is so incredible, and what you've achieved, after those diagnoses. Before we even get into that, you go from being a successful CTO to being hit with with Parkinson diagnosis. What was your initial response to all of that?
I couldn't believe it, right? Because the last thing that you think about when you hear the word Parkinson's is someone in their 20s. Mm-hmm. Only thing I knew about back then when I was diagnosed, the only thing I knew about Parkinson's was that it only happens with old people. It doesn't happen to someone in their 20s, right? But we know today that that's not true. About 15 to 20% of everyone who's diagnosed are considered young onset. That's people before the age of 50. But I couldn't believe it. I think my first words to my neurologist when I was told I had Parkinson's was, are you effing kidding me? So I was swearing. I just remember a rush of disbelief, and then anger followed pretty quickly behind that disbelief. I was angry for some reason. I didn't know why. Probably more like, why me? Why did I get dealt this hand this early in my life? I just couldn't believe it, and I didn't believe it for the next 8 years.
So for 8 years, there was a level of denial of what this diagnosis was like. And so as you start to come to grips with that process, how did you figure out how to control your path?
Nothing came overnight, right? I had to figure out along the way. And it was 8 years of living in denial, and really what I was trying to do, because I was told at the time I was diagnosed that, Jimmy, you're probably going to be in a wheelchair by the time you're 45 years old. So do everything you can to take care of your family. So that's what I did. I went heads down into my work. And there was just building a lot of stress. I was putting a lot of stress on myself. And I didn't have time to believe that I had Parkinson's. But unfortunately, Parkinson's, that's not how it works, right? It continued to progress. And then one day, 8 years after my diagnosis in 2010, I fell down the stairs with my son. And he was only 10 months old at the time. And I knew at that point that I had to change something. I didn't know what it was going to be yet, but something had to change. And that just kind of started the mindset shift, if you will, from a pity party and a work and earn money and make sure my family's going to be set mentality to, okay, the last 8 years I really haven't been here, and look what it's cost me this fall down the stairs with my son, where I have now become a burden to my wife, and I have become a danger to my kids just by being around them. So I think that was kind of like the small spark that kind of triggered everything, that kind of just snowballed and rolled along the way.
Yeah. But from a mental standpoint, was it when you had that fall, was it a crushing blow to you as from a male ego that
Oh,
I have to now take a step back and admit to myself that, all right, I got to figure out a different path here?
yeah, that's never an easy pill to swallow, right? When
Yeah.
you realize at some point in your life that um, maybe you aren't the strongest person in the family, maybe you aren't the one that has to hold everything together, and that maybe you should start relying on other people. Asking for help was the hardest thing I've had to learn to do. Absolutely, I think my ego. I've always been a competitive person. I've always been a driven person, and I think that still shows today, just a little bit differently. But there from that shift to the point where I would always have to be the person who leads to the person now that has to ask for help. That was a transition in itself, and that was not easy for me.
And where did you start with that help? You say you have kids, you have a wife. What was that first place that, did you lean into your wife and ask her for help, or did you kind of go outside to start building that resilience to be able to say, I need to ask my wife for help?
No, it started with my wife, for sure, and it took some realization for me to realize that she's always been trying to help, but I've been pushing her back during those 8 years. I when I think back, there was a lot of, hey, you don't have to take this on yourself. You don't have to do this yourself. But I've always pushed her back. But after I took the fall, I sat down with her and we just looked at each other. We're like, something has to change. I just remember her telling me that, you don't have to do this by yourself. We can figure it out. Now, up to this point, because she took my lead on everything, because I was ignoring the problem, she was ignoring the problem, right? So she really helped. And one of the first things that she did to help was to help me open my eyes to really what I'm living with, Parkinson's disease. Still 8 years later, we still didn't understand it. But then she dove into the research. She dove into the information, and she relayed that back to me. And I'm grateful for this too. She did it. She relayed that information back to me in a pace in which I can consume it and and then do something or use the information instead of in one year out the other, like most
Right.
like most guys.
Right. That's someone who knows you really well, that knows how to get you to process the information and it's sustainable and it sticks. So
Yeah.
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 Well,
I'm a lucky guy. I'm a lucky guy to have her for sure.
yeah, man. I think I just got back from my 20th anniversary. We just got back from Greece, and you think about 20 years. You think about playing professional sports and all the injuries, and
Yeah.
we were just sitting down talking about I had a shoulder surgery on my left shoulder. Then 3 weeks later, I had a thumb surgery and a right shoulder surgery, and I'm in a sling. And here it is, when we talk about being humble, having to ask someone to shower you, to wipe you, to do all those different things is very humbling. And so, making sure you're with the right one, it is very, very important, especially, when you come across those type of challenges. And so, big hands and kudos to your wife, because it's, she stepped up for you. And that's really awesome to hear. Now, you take all this information, you're receiving all this information that, you guys are diving into the research, and you flip the script. You go from, this passive mindset to being proactive, and you get proactive into fitness. You get proactive into, to running marathons and, creating really hard challenges with someone who's been diagnosed with Parkinson. What was that switch like for you?
It was a very slow burn. I would like to. That's how I always describe it. Because people look at me now and I'm fit, right? But people don't understand that doesn't come overnight. But initially, I didn't. When I started, after I took the fall with my son, I didn't know what to do. Right? I knew I couldn't. I wasn't smart enough to find a cure for myself. Right? But what I could do was I could give my body up for science. I can get involved in clinical trials. I can get involved in studies and learn more about the disease, number one. And number two, if there happens to be a cure in the works in a clinical trial, I might be the first to get it. So that's what I did. The first thing I did was I was just signing up for medical research after medical research after medical research. Anyone that would take me, I would go, and I would give my body up for it. And one of them in particular was a forced exercise study. And what that means is essentially I would go into a clinic. It's a physical therapy clinic, and they would force me to exercise. Now, if I couldn't do it myself, and back then I was 250 pounds, and I couldn't walk without a cane because I kept falling over. So they had to force me to exercise by manipulating my muscles. They were moving my limbs for me.
Right.
And then I noticed that after these sessions, I would feel, pretty good, in terms of how my body was moving and compared to how it was before. And then I remember distinctively one time, my third session, I went in there and they strapped me into this recumbent bicycle machine. And they're like, this thing is going to go and it's going to take you with it, and you better keep up.
You got to keep up.
Yeah. And this machine just went, and then my legs were tied into it, and I just had to go on and follow it. And it was probably the worst thing that I could experience at the time, because first of all, my body isn't conditioned to do all that. And I think we did like 11 miles on that thing. Right. But right at the end of it, I felt like everything loosened up. I could move so much better. And it just kind of clicked. I'm like, maybe I should do more fitness on my own. Maybe there's something to this exercise thing I should do more on my own. So I came home, I told my wife, and we just started very little by little, right? I just walking around the block with my cane. And then I would do it every day. Every day I try to do a little bit more. I always say, if I could take one more step, or I can get one more rep in the gym, that would be something more than yesterday. And that's exactly what I did for the next 2.5 years. I kept doing that until I was able to run again. And I started losing weight. I left my cane at home because I became more confident in the way that I moved. And then in 2012, I ran my first 5K. When I crossed that finish line and saw my wife and my kids cheering and how happy they were, I knew that I was onto something. And I just kept putting that one more step mentality into my everyday training. Next thing you know, I was running marathons and half marathons. The next thing you know, I was doing 16 of them, in the course over the years, and over 100 half marathons. I just kept going.
That's unbelievable. I'm sitting here thinking about, my wife, she likes to get out and run, and she's like, "Oh, why don't you come run with me?" And I'm like, "Absolutely not. I'm a former 320-pound lineman. A lot of aches and pains, and now hearing your side, your story, it's like, all right, maybe I can do this and get out and run and enjoy these type of runs with my wife." And so, that many marathons, what was your regiment like? What was your was there any setbacks along the way as you start to increase that type of physical activity?
Yeah, absolutely. The setbacks came in many different forms, right? Not just your typical overuse injury from running, right? Not your typical running injuries. All that happened, like plantar fasciitis that came in, and you have overused calf muscles, tendonitis. All these things came in from typical running. That comes from that will happen to anybody who's running that doesn't have Parkinson's. But other things that happen, my Parkinson's progression, Parkinson's continue to progress. It didn't stop all of a sudden, right? It's still progressing.
Right.
So I had to deal with what these symptoms the one that really bothered me the most when I was running is called dystonia. And dystonia is a cramp of the muscle, essentially. Mm-hmm. If you ever had a Charlie horse, right?
Oh yeah.
if you stretch out the Charlie horse, it goes away in a couple of seconds, right? But a dystonia lasts for hours. So, just imagine having a Charlie horse for a couple of hours when you're trying to run a marathon, And the worst part is that it happens in the foot. So my toes are curled underneath as I'm trying to run. Right.
And this is in the process of actually doing the activity, not when you're laid up resting.
Right.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I had to learn to adapt. I had to learn to make changes. How can I continue to run? Walking is always an option, right? There's no shame in slowing down. There's no shame in taking a break. There's no shame in walking. But again, I'm a competitive guy. I'm always trying to beat myself. How can I be faster this week? So I started adapting and making changes to my stride when these symptoms appear until they would go away. And then I would go back to a normal, like, for example, when you're running marathons, it depends on what camp you're in. There's a lot of people always tell you want a midfoot strike or you want a toe strike first. And that's great and all until my toes are curled under and I can't strike. That's a lot of pain. So then I switched to a heel strike when I'm experiencing the pain. So, it's like little things like that I make adjustments during the middle of the activity so that it allows me to push forward. And allows me to move forward that has helped me along the way. And I think, to be able to understand that, I've never had that before. Like, I was just in my own self-pity party about Parkinson's. Like when a symptom comes in, I just like, I'll just lay here until it goes away. I never really actively try to use movement or to use other means of maybe we call it distraction, right? Other means of distraction to kind of push through or around whatever it is I'm experiencing so I can finish the task at hand.
Yeah. I mean, I can relate to that in a different way. One year I broke my hand, plate and 8 screws. And I remember breaking it in the middle of a play. And then we finished, we score. I was playing in Chicago at the time. We score, Matt Forte. We crossed the goal line, and I run to the sideline and tell my trainer, "Hey, I broke my hand." And we go in and get a quick X-ray, and they ask me, "What do you want to do?" And I was kind of like, "What do you mean? What do I want to do?" And they numb it up, put a cast on it, and I walked back on the field, and I finished the game. Didn't miss a play, but my motivation was, the job security. There's no job security in the NFL. Someone's always looking over your shoulder. But also, hey, this is my opportunity in my life to really provide for my family. And so, in the mindset of thinking about that, what was your motivation as you're running a marathon and you're in this kind of pain and discomfort, and instead of slowing down and maybe walking or waiting till it kind of alleviate. What was that mindset, that mental, because that's some mental toughness to push through that kind of pain in those moments. What was that motivation for you?
It's always been my family. It has always been my daughter and my son and my wife. Not necessarily in that order, of course. But I just remember when I was falling down the stairs. People say this all the time. Everything goes in slow motion when you're in that situation. And it was for me because I could see my wife and my daughter at the bottom of the stairs. They witnessed the fall. And I just remember the look on both of their faces, the look of horror, the look of worry, and they were just terrified. And I remember that look, and it's been burned into my memory ever since. And of course, my son screaming, right, as I was holding him going down the stairs. That sound, that look, is a constant reminder for me. I don't ever want to put them in that position again. I don't ever want to be in that position again. I don't ever want to hear those sounds or see those images ever again. So when I am like battling through my own pain or whatever it is, I think right back to my family, and I'm like, no, this is why I'm doing this. Is that so that I don't have to experience. I don't have to see that face, and I don't have to experience those sounds ever again.
Man, that's unbelievable there. Family is a great motivator. And
absolutely.
And it's a great motivator when you are going through challenging times. And so we're going to jump in. I'm going to give you a quick 2-minute drill. I'm sure you're familiar with the 2-minute drill. We like to do one going into halftime. So, and these are just some easy, soft talk questions for you. What was your first big race you completed?
My first big race was Chicago Marathon in 2012. My very first marathon. Blew it away. 4 hours and change. That was big for me.
Oh, wow. What snack fueled you on that when you was training for that?
Ice cream, always ice cream.
Oh, I was hoping you said something like that because as a former lineman, we love our ice cream. So, all right. So you've also, and we'll get into this. You also done, the Ninja Warrior. What was your funniest moment, doing the Ninja Warrior?
I don't know if you know what a flyaway is. That's a move that gymnasts do when they do just a complete sprawl flip 360 in the air, right? The funniest moment for me is that I unintentionally did a flyaway while I was failing at an obstacle, and it made for one of the most spectacular splashes you would have ever seen.
I definitely got to find that and see that one. All right, your favorite workout when time gets hard?
Burpees. Just straight up burpees.
Oh no!
Yeah.
Oh no!
Just straight up.
That's
burpees.
my worst nightmare. Burpees.
When I was falling a lot, I always asked myself, what can I do in the fitness world that's gonna help me get up in case I fall? And if you think about it, that's a burpee, right? Burpees an intentional fall to the ground, and I'm building strength to get back up. That's my go-to.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense, actually. All right, one mantra that you have that keeps you keeps your drive every day.
This one is every day. It's gonna be my more each day mantra. What can I do today that's more than yesterday? Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be lifting more weights or doing more reps, right? Doing more could be, what am I bringing back to my family? What am I bringing to the Parkinson's community? That's doing more. What am I doing to help other people? That's doing more. So that's my mantra now, is what can I do today that's a little bit more than yesterday?
Man, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, that's a great 2-minute segment. We're going to jump back in here. You mentioned you went from, walking with a cane to no cane to going to over 100 plus, have marathons and marathons. And those are mentally challenging in themselves. How do you structure that daily step forward mindset, knowing that you're still trying to do one thing better than you did yesterday?
Yeah. It's discipline. I think that sums that all up. People can always, I used to look for motivation. I used to look for inspiration from all over, and I would find it, and that's great, but you can't always find inspiration. There isn't always a motivation to do things, outside of my own family, but sometimes there's just no outside factors for motivation. So I started to develop my own discipline. If I can develop my discipline to the point where I become automatic, I know that this is what I got to do every day, and this is what I'm going to do, then there's no stopping me, right? Even on days where I just feel like complete crap and my body has given up, my medicine isn't working, and I just can't, I can't physically do things, I still get my ass up and go to the gym, right? And as long as I'm in the gym, whatever I can do is better than nothing. Whatever I can do is better than than nothing sitting at home. So, even on bad days, again. So I think discipline for me is the key.
Now, is it challenging? You just mentioned, balancing your medicine when something is not working versus working. What is that challenge like when you're doing this type of physical activities with, some of the side effects of the different medications?
Yeah, I've been living with Parkinson's now for 22 years, and I'm at the point now where sometimes I have to choose between, do I want the side effects or do I want my actual symptoms? Right. And to find that balance is tough. And that's something that it's a constant adjustment for me, especially for the last 12 years as I have been physically active, because food affects effectiveness of my medication. My activity affects how long my medicines last in my body. And then also just the general, what are the side effects of the medication? And one example is dyskinesia is a side effect of the medicine that I take. And you can see a little bit right now throughout this interview. It's this little swaying thing that I've got going. That is dyskinesia. That's uncontrolled, swaying motion. It's kind of rhythmic almost. It's almost predictable if you watch me long enough. So do I want that? Or if I'm not on medication, I won't have that, but I've got uncontrolled tremors, right? To the point where my speech is affected, to the point where my, like I couldn't even, like this entire table that I'm sitting at would be shaking from my tremors, right? And then all you're going to see in the camera is this, blurred version of me. So I've got to choose in this moment, do I want to be rhythmic or do I not want to be rhythmic, right? So the thing is, things like that you got to play balance with in your medication. So I'm actually a little bit over medicated, so that I can speak a little bit better and that I can stay mostly in frame in this camera for you.
Yeah, no, that's, I mean, it's these are little things that you don't think about, and,
Right.
and as you're talking, I'm thinking about this process that, you must have a tremendous amount of discipline, as you just talked about, and that comes in a lot of different forms too. And I'm sure you probably do a lot of journaling and a lot of, tracking of all these different aspects. And, so how much is that part of your daily, routine is just getting up and making sure that, you've tracked everything before you get your day started.
Yeah, it's a lot easier now today because I've been doing it for such a long time. But I remember when I first started, it was before we had all these apps on the phones, right?
Oh, yeah.
12 years ago, it was
notepad.
Notepad, exactly. And I would just mark down these, those grid paper that we used to have.
Yeah.
That's what it is. And I would just mark down, when I took medicine, how I was feeling. I gave myself a score of 1 to 5. How I was feeling. I gave myself a score of 1 to 5 in terms of my symptoms, how they were doing. I wrote down what I ate, what I was doing, what time it was, and I kept all of that. And then that evolved from the notepad to Excel spreadsheets, right? And then that evolves. But over the last 11 and 12 years or so, I've got a lot of data about how medicine affects me, how food changes, how my medicine works, and how physical activity affects all that. And all that information has taught me, what my entire medicine schedule should be like for the day, depending on what I'm trying to achieve. Like when I'm competing on Ninja Warrior, that medicine schedule for that day is going to be different. But when I'm just I'm retired now, but back when I was still working, when I'm in the office all day, my entire medicine schedule looks completely different than when I need to be in the gym, right? But just like you said, it took a lot of journaling and a lot of bookkeeping to make that happen. Yeah. The great thing about people who are doing this today is that there are apps that are available to help you do that, and smart devices like your watch here can help you track a lot of that too. So it's made that entire process a little bit more simple for people today. Yeah,
that's a lot, and I'm sure that's a lot for you. And but you're doing it, and you're doing it well, man. And
Thank you.
I'm just so inspired right now. Just even hearing going through the process, because it's you're thinking about your family, you're thinking about how you want to show up for them daily, and then I look at you and see how the physical shape that you're in right now, and I'm like, man, there's no more complaining from me when I'm having some old football ailments here, and so. But you talked about this, you've talk about Ninja Warrior, and you've you shattered all kinds of records, and you in the World Guinness books and all these different things. Was that a mindset of, did you set out to break a lot of different records, or was it just something that you just got in a rhythm and it just kept coming and it kept happening for you?
I always say these are all opportunities that came about due to the way that I live my life with Parkinson's. We talked very briefly about the burpees, right? So I was falling a lot. So I did a lot of burpees so that I can make sure that I can fall safely and get back up, enough strength to get back up. So I started doing more each day. I started with just 5 burpees a day at the end of my workout. And then I did 10, and I did 15, and I did 20. And I started doing so much of it that I got so good at it. One day I just wondered, I was like, you know what? I wonder what the world record is for a number of burpees in 1 minute and how quickly they could be done. And I looked it up, and I'm like, I think I can do this.
I could do that.
Yeah. And I did, right? And I did. And like I said, this was an opportunity that came up because I was looking for a way to keep myself safe from a Parkinson's symptom perspective, But then because I worked on that and I worked on that so much, it gave me the opportunity to set a world record, and then that world record gave me the opportunity to, raise more awareness about Parkinson's and raise money for research and things like that. So, I think overall, just all the things that came along with it was all, an opportunity of how I was living my life. And the same thing with Ninja Warrior is that my daughter kept pushing me back in 2017, 2016. She kept pushing me because she loved the show when it would come on. And she kept pushing, yeah, you should go. And I'm like, no, I have Parkinson's. I can't do it. But just to shut her up, right? I applied for the show just to shut her up. But then when they gave me my first chance on the show, it was an opportunity then for me to, okay, now I can bring the Parkinson's awareness to an even larger audience.
Yes.
But in order for me to do that, I've got to show up, right? Right. So then I went into training, and that's kind of how in 2017 I got my first shot at American Ninja Warrior, and I've been going back, for 6 years after that, 7th, including a family special that we did with Ninja Warrior, and even that in itself has taught me lessons, because we're just moving our bodies along these obstacles, no weights, right? We're moving our bodies.
Right.
And in training for that, my everyday life is avoiding obstacles as a person living with Parkinson's, avoiding falls. Mm-hmm. So when I'm training for that in the gym, it's really helping my daily life. So like I said, everything that I've done has come as an opportunity from my experiences in living my daily life.
That's you talk about these opportunities, and you've taken this opportunity to publicly own your story, and that's come in, raising over, hundreds of thousands of dollars for the disease. You've also, when I think about this, I'm thinking about it, it's taken me years to own my own story of, being diagnosed with dyslexia. Completely different, but like I never wanted anyone to know. And so how did you balance that vulnerability and to step up and lead by an example for others?
It wasn't an easy transition, but just like you said, in your initial instinct is to hide, right? It's to hide it. I used to sit on my hands because my hands would be tremoring, especially in a corporate situation. You don't want people to know that. You don't want to have any sign of weakness, right?
Yeah.
Because that's a disadvantage in anything that you do in life. But what I learned over time is that most people aren't assholes. Most people are actually very sympathetic, and they understand that life happens.
Right.
Once I understood that, I realized that the additional stress that I was putting on myself to hide, and the effort that I was putting in hiding from everybody, the return on that effort wasn't there anymore. And that by coming out, first of all, who your true friends are when you come out, right?
Right.
The ones who phase themselves out, you didn't need them anyways, right? But the ones that stuck around, the ones that are there to support you, those are the people that you want in your circle. But no, that transition didn't happen overnight. It took a lot of time to happen. But the more I realized that all I'm doing is telling my story, and that's not hard to do, right? Yeah. But hiding is hard. So why put that additional stress on myself? And then we also know that stress is the number one elevator of Parkinson's symptoms. And if I can remove that side of it, I remember just coming out for the very first time when I was running that Chicago Marathon and trying to raise some money, and I told everybody why I was doing it. I just remember a weight being lifted from my shoulder,
I can recall that same weight once I started to share my story, just like, oh, okay. Yeah.
It feels so good. Like, why the hell was I hiding this whole time?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We talk about, at Team Q, one of my technology company, we talk about, we measure these things like adaptability and coachability, and I'm thinking back to early on, you said you was talking about receiving this information from your wife. What are those things that you click into or you think about, when it comes to being coachable and receiving this information, receiving information from your doctors, your wife and family, the feedback, what is that mindset that keeps you coachable in these tough moments?
I learned from my dad, actually. He's always told me that there's always somebody better than you. There's always somebody better. That no matter what you're doing, there's always someone that's going to show up and that's going to humble you, right? Now, the only exception is Michael Jordan. I don't see anyone that can humble him yet, right? From a basketball perspective, right?
So you're not going to get into LeBron and Jordan's debate here now?
No, there's no debate. There's no debate. I'm a Chicago guy. I'm Gen X. There's no debate, right?
Absolutely.
But for me, it really is, just the whole reality around that is, there's always somebody better, and you can be pissed off that somebody's better than you, or you can learn from them and learn what they're doing that's better, and then take that to better your own situation, right? When I started running, here's the thing: anybody can run, right? Anybody who is physically capable can get up and run, right? But I didn't know until I started speaking to a running coach, right, that there are certain different strides, there are breathing techniques. I didn't learn none of that. I didn't know any of that. There's no way I would have been able to figure it out myself. And then when I switched over to Ninja Warrior, I didn't know how to move my body in space. I didn't know how to swing and hang. So I had to get a coach, right?
Right.
Same thing with my doctors. I have my neurologist that I talk to about Parkinson's. But when I have tendonitis, I'm not going to ask my neurologist. I'm going to go ask an orthopedics, specialist. So, that's kind of my attitude, is that there's always somebody who is an expert in a certain field. And if you can learn from them, you can make yourself better. So that's how I work around all of that.
Okay. All right. I like that. I see you wearing this shirt, Team Fox.
Yeah.
Tell me about Team Fox.
Team Fox is the fundraising arm of the Michael J. Fox Foundation. The grassroots fundraising arm for the Michael J. Fox Foundation. And what that means is Team Fox is just full of people, regular people like me, who started just running a marathon and then wanting to use that as an opportunity to raise a few dollars for Parkinson's research. The great thing about Team Fox is that it is a privately funded organization, which means every dollar that anybody who joins Team Fox and raises, every dollar or every penny of that dollar goes directly to research. The operating costs for the team itself is anonymously donated every year by a generous donor, and he or she covers all of the operating expenses for Team Fox. Wow. So that I think my numbers could be off, but last year I think they raised right around $20 million. Every penny of that $20 million went directly to our research program to forward Parkinson's research, and I think that's important for me. I'm a patient board member on the Michael J. Fox Foundation, but I started out as just a Team Fox member, raising money and running marathons.
Yeah, man. I mean, I just think about as I was doing some research on you guys, you've built such a community, and you've done it in such a unique way through your marathons and through American Ninja Warrior and not only that, but just your TikToks and like you guys you've done a lot of cool things in a unique way. What kind of hope are you hoping to build? I know it's kind of a weird question, but what kind of hope you're hoping to generate and build for others through these communities that you're building? Yeah,
I think there's for every time I put out something on TikTok or on Instagram, I have two missions, or two goals I'm trying to reach. for everything that I put out. Number one is to reach the Parkinson's community, of course, to show them the possibilities of the things that I do. And number two is to reach someone that has no connection to the Parkinson's community, and to help educate them. And I think that's how we truly can spread awareness, is that I can make content all day and talk about Parkinson's to people who have Parkinson's, but they already have Parkinson's. They know Parkinson's.
Right.
In order to truly create awareness, I want to talk to the people that don't have Parkinson's, right? So that they understand, so that they don't make, they don't make quick judgments when they see a person with Parkinson's out in the world, or, they understand it a little bit better, so that if they ever encounter a person, there's more sympathy, there's more compassion when they encounter somebody. One of the stigmas of Parkinson's is that a lot of times we look like we're drunk. We look like we're on drugs out there, just because of the way that we're moving. And that has caused a lot of issues for us. Law enforcement not believing, us that we're not on drugs, and the medical community not believing that we're not high on drugs or something like that. So that's why my goal is to go out there and truly raise awareness and reach the people who aren't normally in the Parkinson's community, and bring them into the community through my antics on TikTok. That's why I use a lot of fitness. I do a lot of challenges. I take on kids half my age, doing their fitness challenges. And then I throw my own Parkinson's spin on it. And then I help people understand why it's hard to move in a certain way, and how is it that I'm able to do it, and what goes on in my brain and my mind, so that I can make these moves.
Right. And what is your, not everyone is equipped to move and do the things that you're doing with their Parkinson's. And so, when you encounter someone who is looking up to you, how do you share, your regimen and routine in a way that can help support them, help them in their process, versus trying to do it the exact same way you're doing it? Because I'm sure everyone is different.
Everybody is different. And what I always like to tell people is that I'm never going to win American Ninja Warrior. I'm never going to win the $1 million. I'm not going to beat a 16-year-old kid in speed. I'm never going to win a marathon. I am not running, an hour and 58 or 2 hours and 3-minute marathons. I'm never going to do that, right? But I could strive to be average or above average in everything that I do, right? And if I can do that, right, Parkinson's is a progressive disease. It's continuously getting worse. But if I can stay average, or I can stay above where Parkinson's is taking, that's a win, right? Like, when you say a progressive disease, it should be slowing me down. But if I'm running a marathon 4 hours this year, and next year I come back and do it again, and I still run 4 hours, Parkinson's didn't slow me down, even though it's progressing. That's a win, right?
Wow.
So I always joke to people, I'm the world's okayest at everything. Even though I have world records, I have three physical records, I'm still the world's okayest at doing everything.
Yeah. With these records that I'm looking at and seeing, I think you are above the okay status of what that looks like. So
overall, I'm just above average. I think that's the way. But if I can help people understand that when they walk into the gym, they're not Jimmy Choi, right? They're not Michael Jordan. They're not Muhammad Ali, but if they can be the best versions of them and who they are, right? They can be the best versions of a Tom Smith or a Jane, Jane Smith, or whoever they are.
Right. That's awesome. Well, when you think about the legacy that you're leaving, what do you want people to think and say about Jimmy as this legacy has been built?
To be honest, I want them to laugh. I want people to laugh. I think it's important for laughter is the best medicine, right? So when they look at me, obviously, yes, I do want them to remember the advocacy work that I put in. But at the same time, I hope that they remember that I always do it with a little bit of humor. And at the same time, like, let's say I joke with my kids. I think, one day when I'm not here, at my funeral, you guys can laugh, and that in itself would remind you a little bit of me. And I think that'll be a great thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, my last question for you, Jimmy, because this is, it just, again, like I said, I got goosebumps just, hearing your story here. But my last question for you is, when you think about, all the way before you even got your diagnosis, what are those, until now, what is those intangibles that's made you who you are that you want people to know? Because again, when we're not there in your daily life and seeing the highs and the lows, what are those? I want people to know what those intangibles that make Jimmy who he is today.
I've been thinking about this for quite a while now, and there isn't a word that I could really use to describe it, but I will use it. But I will describe it this way: I am really good at this, using focus to distract myself. Right, and we touched on that a little bit earlier, right? I think I'm really good at distracting myself from the pain. I'm distracting myself from a symptom. I'm distracting myself from the suck of doing, 1,000 burpees at a time, right? When you distract yourself, you can't just let your mind wander, because you still need to be safe, right? And that's what I mean when I say a focused distraction. Is that I think I'm really good at fooling myself, I guess is a way to say it, into thinking that whatever is happening can wait. Whatever is happening in terms of a symptom moment. Or in the moment, or pain, or whatever the mental grind that's happening, like of running a marathon or whatever is happening at the time, that can wait, right? And I can distract myself with something else that brings more purpose into the things that I'm trying to do. So I think that's my greatest intangible, is to be able to distract myself.
I like that one, and that's a new one I'm putting in my book here to dive into, because I think as an athlete, that's what we think about. It's like, how do we, when you step out on the field, you have to flip that switch.
Yeah.
You have to flip that switch and say, I'm focused in this moment on what the job is at hand. And it seems like you've taken that and created a full process around to manage the discomfort and things that you're feeling. And so that's from my standpoint, I think it's a next level, man. And your story and who you are and what you've done, what you accomplished is tremendous. And I can't wait for this episode to get out. And I think I will say I did lie to you and said that was my last question, but I do have one more for you. And the last question is, if you had to go back and talk to your 16-year-old self, what would you say to Jimmy?
Buy a 16-year-old self way back then. Buy Yahoo stock when it first comes out, and then sell it. No, but from a life advice perspective, I think I would definitely tell that life is going to throw obstacles in your way, but there's always a way around it. And what that means is that there's more than one. The saying is there's more than one way to skin a cat, which I don't really understand that saying. But for every problem in life, it's not just not everything's in black and white. There's always a way that you can something to get around it, and sometimes you got to find it. Sometimes you got to invent your own way. But whatever obstacle there is that's in front of you, there is a way around it. You just got to find it.
Jimmy, that's awesome, man. I really appreciate you joining the Intangible podcast. It's been tremendous. The next time I'm in Chicago, we're going to dinner. Joe Stone Crab, you name it, one of my favorite places. And so I look forward to getting to know you more, because just such a motivation and such a inspiring person and to work through the things that you're working through and having family and still have the humor and the humility, man. It's an honor to have this conversation with you.
Thank you very much for having me on. And I'll throw this out there too. I throw this out to everybody. You know, if you come to Chicago, or if I'm ever, you're in LA, right? If I'm
Nashville.
Oh, Nashville. Okay.
Nashville.
All right. So if we ever come across, let's hit a gym session together, man. I mean,
let's do it.
I think it'll be a lot of fun. I think we can do some damage in the gym.
Absolutely. You probably show me up because, you know, in my old age now, I've kind of just, I do light things now.
You know, and so do I. You know, it's funny because sometimes when I travel, I walk into these CrossFit gyms, right? Nothing against CrossFit. I think CrossFitters are strong and they're crazy in their own way. But I walk in and they're like 200 reps of deadlifts. I'm like, who needs to do that? Right? No. Not me. I don't need to do that.
Guy. No, yeah. Not at all. Yeah. But I would love that. We definitely, when we cross paths for sure, we definitely will link up, man. And you know, anyone out there that has a family member that has Parkinson or just needs support, you know, check into Team Fox.
Absolutely.
Learn more about the organization, help figure out how to help support that organization, man, because I think you're a shining star of what, you know, how to work through these type of adversities. And so I really appreciate you jumping on and sharing with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. An honor to be on.